I know it's been a long time coming, but I'm finally talking about roller coasters I've ridden again after all this time. After gaining 43 new credits this summer, my rankings have finally calmed down because I don't plan on getting any more new credits by the end of the year. With that, I'm still waiting until the end of the year to make my top 25 video. During this video, I will have the overall ranking in the top right corner, so you can have an idea of what I truly feel about it. With that said, let's get right into the video. Taking last place for this video is Pegasus at Mount Olympus. Here we are again with this ride taking last place in a video. This ride is really just rough and boring. The first 2/3 of this ride actually have some decently sharp turns, but it's just bordering on doing nothing, and it doesn't feel pleasant. The finale actually tries to be good with some airtime hills, but they don't do anything, so it just ends up being even more pointless. And then you have the final turn. This turn is so damn violent, even bracing for it hardly helped. What would have helped would be some sort of trim brakes before that turn, or better yet, tear this ride down and replace it with a Gravity Group family coaster. That would fit really well with this park. The only reason I don't have it last in my overall list is because I don't find it to be painful outside of that final turn. In the 14th spot is Little Dipper at Six Flags Great America. For what it is, this ride is actually really good. It's meant to be a family coaster, and that's okay. There's some lightweightlessness on the drops after the turnarounds, and the airtime hill after the second one gave a split second of floater. Other than that, I can't really say there's any more force. It is a cool novelty to ride this historic coaster that went through its original park closing and moving to Six Flags Great America. It may not have any force, but it sure has a lot of sentimental value. In 13th place is Tornado at Adventureland. This ride is loaded with airtime hills that don't give any airtime. Even getting my one ride in the middle, I could easily tell that the back also wasn't getting any airtime, so I decided not to get a re-ride. With how this ride focuses on airtime hills, it's a major shame that none actually give airtime, and that's kind of frustrating. Not only that, but the valleys were not that intense either, so it was really just big and boring. The roughness was fine, but on the valley of the first drop, my elbow hit the side of the train pretty hard, so that dampened my experience even more. I was totally fine making this a one and done credit. Taking the 12th spot is the Underground at Adventureland. Here we go again with Adventureland. This time, the ride really does nothing wrong. The rides that place above it just happen to do a little more. This ride has excellent theming, and it seemed like every prop was working, which is not something I was expecting. The actual layout isn't really anything special, it's just a bunch of lateral turns taken with some speed, but it was incredibly smooth. Overall, this was a surprisingly good ride that I would definitely recommend when visiting Adventureland. In the 11th spot is American Eagle at Six Flags Great America. This ride may have its fans, I'm just not one of them. The first two speed hills did give great airtime, but there wasn't much else during the rest of the ride. The airtime moments after the helix just didn't do it for me. Maybe I got a quick pop of floater, but I just didn't notice it. I got the right side, but that doesn't seem to make a difference. What was especially interesting for me was that helix. One of the slowest parts of the ride is the roughest part of the ride. How is that possible? This ride has amazing speed and great airtime before the helix, but it dips severely in quality during and after that. Going into my top 10 of this list is Outlaw at Adventureland. This ride has a pretty unconventional layout for a CCI. The pops into each bank turn high off the ground almost resemble those of a GCI. This ride as a whole just seems like a janky GCI. Some of the transitions didn't age that well, and it did run a little rough for me, but this ride did have some great moments. The drop gave a nice pop of air while getting great laterals. Most of the aforementioned airtime pops did give decent floater airtime. This ride is just decent all around. It's not the greatest thing, but I would ride it again. Taking 9th place is Cyclops at Mount Olympus. In the past, this ride has been known for giving crazy airtime all over the place, but after the reprofiling, it just didn't hit as hard as I thought it would. There were still some solid airtime moments, but they weren't as insane as people had described them to be. Of course, that final drop still gave amazing airtime in the back row. Other than that, it was just solid. There weren't that many strong forces aside from the airtime. There were some decent laterals, but they weren't too crazy. This ride may be a little overrated, but that doesn't mean it isn't fun. In the 8th spot is High Roller at Valley Fair. With this ride, there's airtime all over the place, and it can be really strong like on the first drop at subsequent airtime hill. But the thing is, you have to be in the back car to experience this ride at its best. And sitting in a wheel seat can make it feel really rough. So I found the best experience to be in the second to back row. It's decently smooth and you still get the same airtime from the very back row. Even then, it's still not perfectly smooth, but it's much more enjoyable. Even in the first half, there are some strong positives in the valleys, but after the first turnaround, you really lose them, especially with the trim on the drop from it. This ride may not be too crazy, but if you ride it in the right seat, it can be amazing. Taking the 7th spot is Blue Streak at Cedar Point. This is a pretty similar story to High Roller, but with this ride, you don't need to sit in the back rows. My dad and I got the 5th to back row, and there was still decent floater on almost every hill. If there was one thing High Roller had above this, it would be the length, but this ride's forces are better and more consistent than High Roller's. You get the same decent positives in every valley. The airtime on most hills is actually really nice, and the laterals on that turnaround were kind of surprising. As long as you don't mind a little roughness, this ride will be a blast. In 6th place is the Legend at Arnold's Park. This was one of the biggest surprises of the year for me. I thought the short duration would make me place it lower, but this ride pulls some legitimately great forces. The positives going into and coming out of that turnaround are actually really good. Even the airtime going into it and the laterals in it are really good, which is something I was not expecting from a coaster of this age. And it's not just that moment. The airtime hills throughout the rest of the ride are actually really good. Really, the only done moment on this ride is the first drop, but it immediately gets overshadowed by the rest of the ride. On top of all that, the GCI retrack they did a while ago is still keeping this ride incredibly smooth. I think if this ride was a little longer, it would have placed so much higher on my overall list. Entering the top 5 is Zeus at Mount Olympus. This ride is just loaded with airtime hills. Aside from the turnaround, that's all you get. I found the first few to actually give really good airtime, but during that turnaround, I got stapled both times I rode it, so I didn't get any airtime in the second half. I'm sure there was some, because I could feel my legs going into the restraint. Aside from that, I found this ride to have a little bit of a shake, which is weird because I heard this ride was incredibly smooth, but it wasn't actually that bad. I'd even say it was the perfect wooden coaster roughness. Overall, I can see why people really love this ride, but I was just unfortunate. Taking 4th place is Viper at Six Flags Great America. This is a ride that really surprised me because I had never seen a POV of any Coney Island Cyclone replicas before. In particular, I forgot that the first drop was twisted, so I didn't brace myself and it was really wild. The repeating turnarounds also gave nice laterals. There wasn't a lot of airtime going into them, but they were still pretty fun. With the airtime hills, some gave great floater airtime, but there were a couple that didn't do much. That's really the only complaint I have here. There's amazing floater airtime moments and laterals in almost every part of the ride. Receiving the bronze medal for this video is Renegade at Valley Fair. No matter how rough this ride gets, I will never not love it. In fact, the more I ride it, the immunity I gain from its roughness seems to increase. If you can look past the roughness, you will be able to really feel the airtime all over the place. The best moments come from going into and out of the high bank turns. They genuinely give borderline ejector in the back row, or in the front row if you're going into them. One aspect of this ride I haven't seen too many people talk about is the lateral force in some of the turns. I'm particularly looking at the bank turns after the second speed hill. It will make you feel like you're about to touch the handrails on the catwalk. If you have your hands up, you probably will. This ride definitely has a special place in my heart, being my favorite roller coaster from before I was an enthusiast. In second place for this video is Goliath at Six Flags Great America. For being my very first RMC, I may love it more than a lot of other people. But that's okay because this ride is fantastic regardless. The first drop in the back row was a whole new level of airtime for me. The inversions on this ride were so whippy and full of hang time. Though there may not be as much airtime on this ride, the airtime moments that come from the first drop, camelback, and pop into the brake run were extremely strong. It's hard for me to say how much I enjoyed this ride. It's the dizziest I've ever been from riding a roller coaster, but that in no way affected my experience. I would have picked no other ride at this park to be my 50th credit. Taking the gold medal for this video is Hades 360 at Mount Olympus. This is one where you really have to look past the roughness to enjoy it as much as I did. Thankfully, I was able to do that. This ride has some of the most insane elements on a wooden coaster. The pre-lift is full of amazing ejector airtime moments and great laterals. The first drop and airtime hill after the overbank give the best floater airtime on any wooden coaster I've been on. Even though the Hades Island in the middle of the parking lot is the most iconic part, my favorite parts are the underground sections. It's so loud down there and you can never tell what's coming next, unless you're entering or exiting it. Really, the only downside with this ride is the insane pothole on the step up right before the corkscrew. Other than that, this ride is just a perfect experience for me. That will be it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Sorry for promising worlds of fun on this list and not getting there. Since I've been on so many more coasters now, I will keep the videos to those I've been on. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.